Your Money and Your Life podcasts by Mogers Drewett to help you navigate life's legal and financial challenges.
I am absolutely delighted today to be talking to somebody who knows something about a subject we tend to just brush under the carpet. We don't want to talk about it, mostly because it involves our mortality, something that we just rather not think about. But the fact is, it's really important. We need to talk about these things. And the person that I'm going to be talking to knows everything on the subject. Now, when I say mortality, you're probably thinking I'm going to be talking about wills. No, this is something else. It's called a lasting power of attorney. And I'm delighted to have with me today Kate Norris, who is an absolute expert in the subject, knows it inside out, because I know very little indeed. And she's going to educate me and hopefully you as well on the subject. Hi, Kate.
Hello.
Very pleased to have you here. Now, let's start off with a very basic one, which is, we talked about the fact that we tend to brush it under the carpet. Is that true? I mean, that's an impression that I get. Nobody really wants to talk about it. We're quite sort of British, even in a way, about talking about these things. We don't talk about, our mortality, things that we might handling about.
Yeah, and quite often you have families that come to see me that haven't had those conversations with their parents. And it's too late then. They haven't done the powers of attorney and they wish in hindsight that they'd been more open, had the discussions about what happens if you're not able to look after your affairs.
Yeah.
I'd say that is very common.
And if, to start things off as well, could you just explain in sort of an outline terms what we are talking about with lasting power of attorneys? Because I said in the introduction, it's not a will. So what are they?
They're a legal document where you appoint your attorneys, and these are people that you trust to look after your affairs. So you have property and financial affair attorneys and separate document for health and welfare. So you don't have to have the same attorneys. You can have different attorneys depending. You might find that some would be better with health and welfare decisions to be made or financial. So these are the trusted people that are able to make decisions for you if you're not able to do so yourself.
Why do you think they're important? Why is it important for us to have one?
Because if you don't have one, for example, with finances, then if you lose capacity, then there is nobody legally appointed to make sure that your finances are looked after and managed in your best interests. Right. And the alternative then is an application to the Court of Protection for what's called a deputyship order, which is a lot more involved and costly than doing a power of attorney. And with a power of attorney, you are appointing who you choose, who you trust to be that person. Otherwise, it's the court that will decide if the applicant is the right person.
Right. Okay. And I think in choosing and making that decision, I suppose that's quite a challenge in itself, isn't it, for people to think in a situation where somebody's going to take control of my affairs. And maybe I should just bounce back a little bit and talk about a word that you mentioned there called capacity. And I think, again, that might be a word that some people are aware of in a general term, maybe not in context of an LPA. So when we're talking about capacity, what does that mean?
It's your capacity to make a decision at the time that the decision is needed to be made. So there are grey areas with capacity as to whether someone has capacity or not. If you have a financial power of attorney, then you can act on someone's instructions with or without capacity. With the health and welfare, you need to be assessed to lack capacity to make the decision that's needing to be made, and then the attorneys will be able to make those decisions for you.
Right. And when it comes to actually choosing somebody, what do people need to be thinking about, as in making that selection of who's going to be their attorney?
Yeah, it's somebody with finances, someone that you would trust that would manage your finances always in your best interests, that know you well, to know what it is you would want to happen. Health and welfare, obviously different decisions about your health and your care that you receive. So you have to think about who you would trust to make those right choices for you when in the future you might not be able to do so yourself.
Okay. And you mentioned there are two. So there's one that looks after your physical well-being, your health, fitness. And I'm guessing that falls into mental capacity as well, as you mentioned. And the other one looks after your financial, property related.
Yeah.
Should you always go for both, or is there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Always recommend. Yeah, sorry, no. I always recommend.
I'll be honest. In my experience, I'm aware of people who've actually just taken out one and think that they've got all bases covered, and then discovered the one they've got, which is a bit like Sod's Law. You know, you picked the one that actually you don't need, but you need the other one, and you didn't have that lined up.
Yeah, so, I think if you're going to do powers of attorney, do both of them. You've covered all eventualities in relation to property and finances and your health and welfare. And it's like an insurance policy for your future. So you know that if in the future something happens and you need support and help, then you know that who you've trusted to do that will be able to do so.
Yes. And obviously having both does cover all those bases, doesn't it?
It does, and a lot of the time they may cross over. For example, if you're looking at a decision in the future about a move into care and you're lacking capacity to make that decision for yourself, you have your health and welfare attorneys that would be part of the best interest decision route to make that choice for you. And part of that, move into care would involve your finances if there's a property to sell, paying for the care fees, etc. So a lot of the time they would, cover. You're covering all bases.
There's a crossover, isn't there?
Yeah.
Okay. And then with, the situation that you might find yourself in with appointing somebody, can you determine the powers that they have? Can you set aside sort of specific rules or things that they would be able to do or not be able to do?
Yeah, so on the documents, you have choice to put preferences or instructions. So with a preference, it's something you would like your attorneys to think about and consider when they're making choices for you. So it's a wish rather than an instruction. With an instruction, that is something the attorneys must follow when they are dealing with your affairs and making decisions for you.
Okay.
And you could also, sorry,
okay.
if at the time you're doing your powers of attorney, it may be that you don't have any specific wishes at that time. Later on, you could always put a letter of wishes with the documents to go alongside it, just to give your attorneys an idea of what your wishes and what you would like to happen is, because if you're lacking capacity, you're not able then to have that conversation with them. And it's a wish rather than an instruction then, but at least your attorneys have something they can follow, and it helps them as well when they're making decisions for you.
Yeah. There's a misapprehension, I think, as well, that subjects like this tend to be for people who are already in older age. And that, I guess that is when people are really starting to, there might be a health situation, there might be something where the family have decided that it might be a good idea to have mum or dad fill in one of the lasting power of attorneys for peace of mind. But I guess life can be turn around to you in a very, very quick turn, can't it? And you could find yourself in a situation where this could crop up sooner than you might expect. Nobody wants that to happen. But
no.
Are you finding that there are people in younger generations who are taking out lasting power of attorneys?
Yes, yes, and I also have that conversation with the families if they're thinking about their parents and powers of attorney, because the power of attorney is there to assist you if you are not able to manage your own affairs. It's not all about sort of getting older and sort of the way we think about getting older and maybe some dementia. It's I could have a road traffic accident tomorrow and find myself, incapacitated myself. So I have powers of attorney just so that I know that my family are able to look after me if I'm not able to do so myself. So it's not all about getting older.
And we'll go back to that situation about those that are looking after your affairs. The attorneys, could it be just one person, or do you have more than one person as your attorney?
You can have one, you can have more than one. The advice would be to have more than one if possible acting, because then if something happens to one of them and you've appointed them jointly and severally, it means you've still got one that's able to act. If you just have the one attorney and you haven't appointed any replacements, then the document then is invalid. And if you then find you lack capacity, you're not able to do a new power of attorney. So it's best to think about sort of the future and have options.
And if just thinking through all the different scenarios now, because you could write this, prepare the lasting power of attorney, then find, life has changed and moved on. Would there be a situation where, and I'm going to be a sporting analogy now, you could have somebody on the bench as in, if they're called upon, they're not actually required if those original attorneys nominated are fit and able. But if one of them isn't, then you've got somebody else that could come off the bench and be an attorney. Could you do that?
Yeah, so they're called replacement attorneys. So you would have your first named attorneys who would be the acting attorneys. If something happened to one of those, if there was a determining event which meant they couldn't act for reasons such as death or incapacity themselves, then the replacement attorneys would be able then to step up into that role of being your actual legal attorney.
Okay. And of course, it comes down to this conversation, I guess, because you might decide individually that, right, I'm going to get my affairs in order. I'm going to get myself a lasting power of attorney, come up with the people who are going to be attorneys, sign the document, get the solicitor to do the necessaries, and that's it. You're absolutely fine. You're sorted. But it would be a bit daft to do that without actually mentioning to the people who are going to be attorneys what you're going to be asking them to do. You wouldn't want it to become a shock, would you? A shock thing when you get a call from a law firm to say, actually, we need you to step in now.
Yeah, so it's good to have a chat with who you would like your attorney to be, just so they're aware of what the role could entail, because it's quite a responsibility, and some people don't wish to act in that role. They will need to sign the documents themselves, so they'll be aware that the document exists. Some people do forget, mind you, if it's years into the future they suddenly get a call. But it's good to have that open conversation, explaining you're going to do with the documents and what their responsibilities are. Yeah,
because it's big. It can be a big thing for somebody to take on that responsibility. But also for the person who's broaching that subject, they might feel a bit tentative about having that conversation because of what it entails. And I guess for a lot of people, actually what you're saying, if you're the person who the lasting power attorney is about, you're the subject, you're actually saying to somebody, I trust you.
Yeah.
And that's
what it is.
That's going to be a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, so financially, you're entrusting someone, they would have access to all of your money, your finances. And so it is, it's all about the trust. And with the health, you could be making life-sustaining treatment decisions, accommodation decisions. So they're big decisions. So it's, it is a very trusted role.
And here's the sort of challenging question as well, or point on this, because with larger families or not so larger families, you're going to have, if you make a decision on this, it could be that you finally work out who the favoured son daughter is. Making that decision, it could be awkward. So, I mean, there are some considerations, and I guess there are some people who feel they've got to even it out so that if it's a son and daughter, then the son and daughter are both nominated as attorneys, and that's it, nice and fair. In the same way that you used to measure out the pot when they were kids. You're at the same level. But that isn't necessarily always going to be the right thing to do. So I guess is the focus going to be on who the person nominated as the LPA subject? It's their choice, isn't it? They need to be happy and comfortable with it. Yeah.
So whoever you're taking out your LPA, it's all about what you want, what your choices are, and have the conversations with your attorneys before, so they're aware of what their role will be and what's expected. So it's all upfront discussed. Yeah.
And the family themselves, because the family may not actually be involved in that if there isn't an attorney nominated within the family, sort of the close family. So I guess that conversation needs to be expanded to at least warn them that, or advise them, not so much warn them, that you've done that.
Yeah, so not everyone appoints their children for reasons they're estranged, or it might be that they're just not the right person to manage the finances, or with the health decisions, they might not want their children to have to make these very difficult decisions for them in the future. So it might not be that there's ill feeling within the family, it's just they're just not the right person for the role. But it's good to have discussions up front so that if in the future it's needed and you haven't, you've appointed someone that isn't part of the family, so they're aware, so it doesn't cause any upset in the future and everyone knows the situation.
Yeah. And when you're looking at the breakdown in terms of what the costs could be, and the person who's actually taking out the LPA would typically be paying for that. What are you looking at for let's say you're going to take out both LPAs?
Okay, so if you were taking out both the LPAs, it would be a sort of around £750 plus VAT. If you're doing 4 documents, so say you have a couple come in, they're doing both documents each, then we would be looking around £950 plus VAT.
Okay, but that would be for everybody. Sorry, both.
Yeah, for both parties. So there'll be 4 documents in total, and there would be the registration fee on top of that, which is payable to the Office of the Public Guardian of £82 per document. But you may well be eligible for, there is an exemption to the fee if you're on certain benefits or you receive a lower income. But so it's always good to look into that before you send your fee off.
And there are people who will have taken out a will and thought, I've got a will, and it's taken care of all that. I don't need to worry about that. Is that right? I mean, or because obviously the LPAs do have a specific purpose, so I'm guessing not. But could you explain?
Yeah, so that's quite a common misconception that I often get discussed is, well, why do I need one? I've got a will, and they are completely separate documents. One dealing with you while you're still alive, making sure you're looked after and all your wishes are met. Yeah. The other, sadly, when you've passed on, and then your executors that you've appointed will be managing your estate, while your attorneys acting whilst you are still alive. So to me, LPAs are just as important, if not more important than a will, because it's why you're still around, and quality of life, and to make sure that you're living your best life, and the right people are making choices for you.
Yeah, and that is the crucial differentiation there, isn't it? That this is almost a living document for the living person who is requiring help at a particular and a very important time. Yeah. When you're thinking about your example of working with a number of clients, as I know you do, Kate, do you have any examples, obviously without giving any personal details away, of situations that might sort of help to explore why these have been very good instruments to have within a family?
Yeah, I mean, a good examples of when there's not a power of attorney in place, I think then you see what happens if you haven't planned for your future, and the family will come in and say, this is something mum was going to do, never got round to it. There's now a lack of capacity. They're in hospital waiting to be discharged out into a care home, and there's nobody appointed to legally look after the finances or an attorney for health and welfare. So you're leaving the decision making, to under the best interest route with the doctors and social services and the family as well, to make these decisions for the health and well-being. And with the finances, at a time when you maybe have properties to look after, bills to pay, care fees to pay, and no one can access the money, that for the family it's a very stressful time when already they're emotionally upset because they're dealing with quite a difficult situation. With the deputyship route as well, it's a lot more costly, and you are applying to the Court of Protection to be somebody's deputy, and it's up to the court to decide whether you are that right person to be the deputy. So the choice of the person is taken away of who they would wish to appoint, and it probably may have been the children, but it's a court that will ultimately then appoint that deputy.
And I'm guessing that also involves time, so things are going to take longer to get organised.
Yeah, so it's a lot more forms to fill out, and you have to declare all the capital and income and expenses, and you need to get a separate capacity assessment completed, which all adds to the time and the costs at a time when you want things done quickly.
Brilliant. Wow. I mean, it seems like a compelling argument to have this in your life, a little bit of life admin that will give you ultimate peace of mind.
Yeah. And you hope that they're never used or needed, but that they're there tucked away. As I said before, it's like an insurance policy. You insure your house and your car in case something goes wrong. So yeah, they're just good documents to have for that, because we never know what's going to happen, just in case.
Well, I know we've spoken before, Kate, and I know that you are very well versed in this subject, and you have an approach which is indeed due to many clients who rely on you. And in fact, a situation where you are the person who is an appointed attorney looking after individuals in certain situations. I mean, out of interest, is that something that is a regular situation for you, or is there only sort of on rare occasions that you're appointed as attorney?
Yeah, so the partners of the firm are appointed as both professional attorneys and as deputies. So we have clients that have appointed us because they don't have family, or the family are abroad, so we may act together with the family that live abroad. So yeah, I have quite a number of clients within the area that I do look after.
And that's really important with individuals, let's say that they are abroad, and then you've got mum in a care home who's being given some particularly difficult times because there might be some challenges about the accommodation, there might be a challenge about the diet, there might be whatever the detail might be, the minutiae of it, or the major issues. You're the go-to person, so you can be there on the ground and sort it out for them.
Yeah, and then I would just report back to the family, so I can be the sort of do the visiting and checking all as well, and making sure everything's looked after here, and so it works well.
And I think that's a really important thing to do, because it just adds that extra layer of peace of mind. Because you imagine the stress of thinking about how you're going to deal with that with a loved one who has previously had the family around them, and they might not do that in this situation. So, an amazing service. Kate, it's been fascinating to hear all about LPAs, and I've certainly learned a great deal. I'm sure the audience has as well. How could people find out about how to contact you specifically?
Well, they can contact me here direct at Mogers Drewett, and my email is kate.norris@mogersdrewett.com, or telephone 01225 750000.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us today.
Pleasure. Nice to talk to you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.